Okay, we're going to talk about the complex issue of drug use today. Viewer discretion is advised. Meeks with the Peaks. In this session, we're going to delve into the surrounding myth, rumor, allegations, and associations with illicit drug-related activities in 1122 King. And I'm going to draw from my personal experience as a child of a substance creator and user and give you guys some first-hand insight, otherwise known as putting you guys on game. So who taught me legal and counterintelligence? My dad. Whenever I tell people that, they're like, oh, yeah, my uncle's a judge or my mom's a court clerk. And I'm smiling, Oh, this world where lineage is revered and children born close to the blue line stand as a testament to the legacy of courage and sacrifice. Their ancestors, warriors of freedom. They stood barrel-chested and admired, leaving an indelible mark. Some kids are just born to the red, white, and blue. And these children dream of living up to the heroic names of their parents and carving out a little piece of that uniform for themselves. My own burden was different. My young eyes didn't gaze upon a wall of honor where my dad was. My dad was on a wall with other strangers, criminals, and I was taught not to carve out a piece of his uniform because it was orange or had stripes. That's right, I saw my dad on wanted and watch list. And I knew a guy one time who was a drug manufacturer, a bank robber, an illicit drug user, but I just called him Dad. You know what I did inherit from him? An uncanny ability to sense the presence of police or operatives. I can spot them and distrust them. My biases are deeply ingrained, to say the least. One corrupt cop to one corrupt county. But look, I did not expect to find this in this case. I mean, it actually blew my gourd. I don't think I've ever been interested in a case where I came to it and thought, wow, this is a fucking task force. These are undercover operatives. These are informants, etc. And I always feel like I'm called to a particular case, like for a particular reason. And I kind of had this like epic spiritual moment, sort of like, what the
Investigators charged 21 people they say operated a drug ring in and around Duke, UNC, Chapel Hill, and Appalachian State University. The U.S. attorney said many of them are current or former students.
Even people who don't even look into true crime, they're like, oh, have you checked out the Idaho murders? And I'm like, damn, you're following the Idaho murders? And I'm like, no, I don't know why everyone's so into that case. And multiple people kept, I don't want to say bugging me, maybe inspiring me to check out this case. First videos that I checked out were, of course, the body cam videos. I police the police. So I'm looking at the grub truck video. What the hell is this? So without much more digging, I'm able to find the announcement from the DEA about a years-long investigation announced pertaining to 3 particular universities and multiple fraternities. And those exact same fraternities also have chapters at the University of Idaho. How scandalous. So speaking of which, you know how universities commonly have problems with keeping the frats and sororities under control. They often have large benefactors behind them, and suddenly the university doesn't have millions of dollars donated to it anymore through those benefactors if they piss them off. This is exactly why the United States should just ixnay fraternities and sororities out of university altogether, but whatevs. More to the point, whenever some shit does go down, they love tooting that off-campus housing shit. They love to cop out and pretend, well, there was nothing they could do about it. But there is, because if the university would take away the fraternity from the school altogether, they wouldn't be able to cause mayhem off-campus. However, often this is the exact setup that goes on at universities where they have Greek Row, which is often located on campus property, and then they have the off-campus sorority and fraternity houses behind Greek Row, or, in front of Greek Row, probably depending on the land, yada yada. But a part of what makes tracking fraternities so complicated is the different chapters. It's like charting multiple gangs and large syndicates. Each chapter has a subchapter that they're working on at each respective university. And
this is not a situation where you have single users, where you have a 19-year-old sipping a beer, where you have someone taking a puff of a joint on the back porch of a frat house. These are 21 hardened drug dealers.
This gets even more complicated because much of the property that they own are owned and managed through asset managers or some other third-party controller. This makes the land, the deeds, and all of that harder to track and also harder to easily pin a property on a frat or a sorority. I mean, obviously, 1122 King was a frat house. It was a sorority house. It was related to a Greek community, one of them or many of them. I've even wondered if Estee was particularly chosen for this because he has a weird pedo charge, and that can almost be a distraction within and of itself because, as I pointed out before, I don't think we need to hone in on just Estee. I think that Estee is a part of a syndicate, and that big old charge kind of takes the power away from the fact that he is probably and most likely managing it for a fraternity, or through the same company or affiliation. Now let's talk about some of the ways that syndicates keep from getting busted and the reason why undercover operations depend on informants, and practically the majority of these charges would never happen without a cooperating defendant or an otherwise cooperating civilian. Some of those fronts include things like establishing a property company. This can serve as a front for the syndicate.
The investigation centers around 3 UNC fraternities, Beta Theta Pi, Kappa Sigma, and Phi Gamma Delta, and one at App State, Delta Chi.
It just so happens that Moscow was actually looking all the way in the next town, little old Troy, and the gas station that it was reported received a request from the Moscow City Police Department for their surveillance footage. And whenever you Google that, you'll come right here, which is beside this frat building and also beside Idaho Realty, a real estate company previously affiliated with the King Road property, through its manager, Dan Estee, as the manager of 1122 LLC, registered in Colorado. And precisely why people were probably interested in that Eugene wrecked Hyundai, because it too was registered to Colorado. And whenever Moscow came out to tell the public about it, they were all like, guess what? She doesn't have any connection to the victims, and she doesn't own any property in Moscow. Interesting choice of words. It also just so happens that another Idaho location in Moscow for that Idaho Realty is right there on Main Street next to where Maddie and Xana worked and pretty close to the Grub Truck location. Now, let's say in a hypothetical situation, this property or company is receiving funds through illicit activity. The house itself could serve to front for transactions not only physically, but also monetarily. We're talking about cleaning money. So put simply, the property is acquired and it's, picture me saying this with quotes, rented out to other members of a syndicate.
Narcotics being sold and used in this case was not only astonishing, it has also reflected the very serious public health crisis.
Now, this can create a legitimate source for income for that company. In other words, the tenants aren't actually paying rent, but they're serving a purpose, serving a front for the property and whatever illicit activity is surrounding the property or pertaining to the property, and they're able to clean a decent amount of G's a month just off of the faux rent that allegedly these syndicate members would be paying. Now, why would I bring up this hypothesis at all? Well, because they've been shuffling this property back and forth for practically no money, and in fact, there's only been 2 times that the property is sold for what appears to be a profit at all. And that was way back in the day before I was even born. It was back in the 70s, you guys. Now, a part of the ownership of this will be a complex structure where the house and the assets are moved a lot, and this can confuse auditors or otherwise investigators trying to uncover money laundering or property and asset syndicates. Just the constant deeds and asset management changes, not to mention the address changes, the agent changes, and the LLCs that own those deeds. And you can have a pretty complicated auditing process. And again, all of this movement, I could put even more in here. Maybe I need to dedicate that to its own episode, because on top of these transactions that you see, again, where they're passing the property back and forth for practically less than $10, I think it was literally less than $10 in each transaction. It definitely was no more than 20. And that's basically like a filing fee, right? They weren't actually selling the house. Another alternative would be that they did sell the house, but they used an illicit profit, meaning not cash, in order to shuffle this about to the different syndicate members. Again, obscuring the auditing process. There's another hypothesis, including a property that's beneficial for packing or transporting illegal goods. This could be illegal weapons, drugs, money, name it. Humans. Not saying that that's what's going on here, but I'm just saying. Now, once these illicit goods would be packaged, it'd be great if they were in a location or property that could be chosen for its convenience, for a quick getaway or even a quick loading process. Well, with a parking lot right next door. All right, this definition can kind of be put into the safe house definition a little bit, but in many syndicates, they work as two completely different processes. Of course, it just depends, but this place is a perfect safe house, and let me tell you why. Because it's a bird's eye. So the place used to be all private. They knocked down the trees, fuck privacy. Who needs privacy? You gotta see what the fuck's going on. And guess what? It does seem like somebody's pretty vigilant. The cops roll up and motherfuckers are already on the roof looking from pretty far away. They knew cops were coming to shit on the day. And also where it pertains to the theory of the house being a trap house, one fact that I always notice that kind of doesn't align with that theory is that the windows are always open in this biatch. Always. And I ain't never seen a trap house that just had open ass windows like that. The views tend to be strictly when you allow it from the other side of whatever's blocking the window on the inside. But the bird's eye does work perfect for a safe house spot, meaning that they could be keeping expensive shit in the home and or storing it there until it can be processed and or loaded or transported. A lot of people have noted that there is the obvious missing wood that prosecution had already mentioned, that the place was missing floorboards and wood, and people have conjectured that this is asbestos, but hello, that level is not old enough to have an asbestos issue according to the blueprints and the proposal to build on to the address according to the records on the home. That upper level is not old enough to have asbestos. That is not it. And you can notice in Maddie's picture of her in her room, she has something blocking this wall. So you can see the wall is kind of, it almost looks wet or something. It's not the prettiest aesthetic value looking at it, and she makes it look very nice. Behind her mirror, she has these kind of sheer curtains or something decorated, and boom, damn, we make sandwiches and we decorate good too. Was something hidden in the wall? Many people have alleged that Xana hid something under her floor for some reason. Not sure why. There was, of course, the conjecture that she had actually asked her dad to come and fix a door for her, presumably her bedroom door. Again, that's positing things that I do not have the facts to. Now, since anyone has actually sat and watched all of the interactions on the Axon videos with police and the Moscow victims before the murders, the alleged noise complaints, the cops are on 10 almost from the moment of getting there. It almost does make one wonder if they kind of understood that maybe the house and the fraternity was running a little bit of game on their own. And you do have the prospect that, Maximilian, the most glorious trap king there ever was, would certainly pay the max to, pay off the police. But maybe it didn't pay out this month. Maybe the police came to shake him down, or maybe it was used as a diversion altogether. Certainly a possibility. In this scenario, certain members of the syndicate would essentially send the police to these residents while they're turning up, turning the music loud. Everyone's like, who the hell's calling the cops? It's a college town. You would think that this wouldn't be an issue, but as I said, it did seem like they were expecting them. They were on the roof, so surely they were expecting them for a moment. And every single time they roll up to 22 King, someone standing in the window, multiple people standing in the yard. One time the police even wait for someone to come out when there wasn't someone outside prior to engaging. And despite knowing the cops are out there beating down and kicking shit, dumping beer, illegally searching backpacks, yet the girls are still kind of turning up at times, yelling, woo! You can even hear it after Beth answered the door. Yes, that's Beth. Do not write that it's not Beth or I will implode, because it's Beth. She has on the same shorts and she has on Beth's shoes. She's answering Beth's door because it's Beth. And even after Beth answers the door for the police, you can still hear some whooping. And remember that the dudes even mentioned that they had been sent out to address police before, and police were like, no, you don't own the place. Just go back in. Seems like they had played divert before as well. In this type of front, let's say, and again, total conjecture, let's say that someone's got some moves to make down the street. Maybe a party that's not so close by has ran out of supply. So say a party close by ran out of shit, they have to run down the street, but you know what? They're under heavy guard because not only are they being policed by the campus, but they're being policed by a private contract with Moscow. Moscow even mentions this in their annual report as having lovey-dovey convos with the frats. Maybe the frats don't like it. Maybe some of them don't mind. So other members of the syndicate send the popo down there real quick. Like, yeah, you guys hang out for a while. Everyone's always conjectured why the hell it took everyone so long to answer, even during the day. Well, if your job was to keep a diversion and keep the cops at bay, so yeah, we all have our conjectures, but at the end of the day, I think many of us do feel like we're pretty sure that this house and possibly the residents were being exploited in some way. Maybe a few of the girls were no noobs to the game themselves. I really wonder about Xana. Everyone has turned up on her mom. And her dad goes relatively unnoticed as also having a record with the Department of Idaho Corrections. Now, from the dates of her dad's discharged charge and her mother's original charges, I believe what is happening to Kara is that she essentially just keeps fucking up her community release, parole, probation. This happens a lot. My dad, the last sentence that my dad served, he didn't even apply for parole because he fucks up on it so much. It's just not worth it. Sometimes you stay down the system for 10 years longer due to community release, being released back into the community on parole, probation, and an often unfair system that has already swallowed them up along with their addiction, etc. Now, I think Kara has gotten way worse of a rap than she should. It always irritates me that everyone assumes because Kara has some charges that she's a snitch and that someone retaliated against her. But Kara has the same damn charge right now. I mean, she's been trying to get this hunker off of her apparently for quite a minute, and none of her charges have actually decreased. In fact, she still has that delivery charge, what most of our jurisdictions will call a distribution charge. So again, when I see forums conjecturing about her and they're like, did she owe someone money and they retaliated because she owed her drug dealer money, and people are like, no, she's a drug dealer. And it's such a misconception about the way the system works. Not only that, but Idaho has mandatory minimums. So anyone who has a attempt to deliver has a 3-year minimum to serve before they can qualify for community corrections. Presumably, she's already served that 3 years, and now she's kind of just arguing with her probation. Not to mention that Idaho does not distinguish between intent to use. What does that mean? That means that with a certain amount of substance, it doesn't matter if it were for your personal use or what your intent to do with it is. Not to mention that being right there in the Palusi area, she has the unfortunate circumstance of crossing the state line often, I'd imagine, and that can bring with it its own implications. Now, on top of that, we also have Ben, Maddie's dad, who also has a Department of Corrections felonious history that is easily available to the public, and so does his wife. And same situation. He has been discharged while his wife is currently in the system. I might have to make those full timelines for you guys, but the moral of the point today was just to point out that Kara's charge is very nuanced. There is no defense of intent, so it doesn't matter what your intent was at a certain scale, you get a distribution charge, and that is a 3-year minimum penalty in the system. And it's pretty fucking sad. And namely, my point is, it does not mean Kara is a fucking drug dealer. Not to mention that whenever it comes to the street game, there are many different levels of drug dealers. And as far as someone who has the apparent addiction issues that she has communicated she is struggling with, she would not be very high up on the dope game. Not because she can't be, but because that's not her current situation. There was times where my dad was on top of the game, and Christmases, ooh boy, we got hella shit. And then there were times where I didn't even see my dad for Christmas. I was with my mom, and my stepbrothers were getting their shit sold for crack. So, sometimes it just be like that. Sometimes we were the kids of a man on top of the game, and typically that meant that he had his addiction somewhat under control during those times. You don't make a lot of money if you smoke a lot of your drugs. You don't make a lot of money if you snort a lot of your drugs, and so on and so forth. Not to mention that no one on top of the syndicate or even in the middle of the syndicate trusts a street level addict. And again, my dad's gone from the tippy top to the very bottom. And I mean, he's gone from the man manufacturing all the way down to being homeless and having similar predicament to what Kara is going through, as we can see from her transient charges, from being somewhere that she shouldn't have been loitering at that particular moment, right? And it ain't got shit to do with shit, okay? Because I can guarantee you'd be on the wrong fucking path right now. Had I been slain and you were blaming it on my dad or anything to do with this fucking job, yes, I just called illicit drug dealing a job. I didn't say it was a legal job, but it's a job. And if you were focusing on what my dad was concerning himself with, you'd have certainly had the wrong idea. And again, I want y'all to know how much Kara has my heart. Kara has my heart in a way that the other parents don't, okay? And no offense. I mean, empathy for all of them. You feel me. But point is, do I think Kara was being trusted to move enough drugs that someone would have went out of their way to not only off her daughter, but to off her daughter's 3 roommates? No. And especially not when we see a fucking control buy going down with what is obviously the task force in the Tri-Cities area the night that we know the murders occurred. I'm going to have to put that in a whole video itself because, again, that deserves a whole video. But I had a lot of things that I wanted to walk you guys through in the different scenarios. Hopefully, many of you are sort of wrapping your head around whatever your gut is telling you to go with, even if it, has nothing to do with any of the things on this playlist or this episode. Shedding light on these issues, especially where it pertains to addiction and social order and the way that Kara is treated fucking shittier than the other parents, and the way that everyone grandstands and the way that everyone drools over Ethan's parents. And it's like, who the fuck can say you're grieving wrong or right? It's just, I don't know. Something about it gets on my nerves when people are like, oh, wow, to only have their grace, and I mean, that's fine to admire them for grace or whatever. To have the feeling, that they're shitting on someone else's way of handling it. And the fucking comments about Kara sicken me. And yeah, I'm biased. Yeah, my daddy's a fucking crackhead. He was also a meth head and a coke addict. And mama prepared me for whatever the fuck you was gonna say about it by being like, look, that's your daddy on the wall. He can't even come into the fucking store. So yeah, it pisses me off. Oh, she didn't even have anything to do with her for 20 years. Sorry, what? How the fuck do you know? That's one thing that irritates me too. Is the fact that people see you as not close to your parent because either your parent was an addict, or in my case, because your parent spent lots of time in state and or federal prison. But I was very close to my father. And I'm close to my mother. But I was close to my father in a different way. In a way that's very special to me and very different than the way that I'm close to my mom. I miss him every day. And couldn't a fucking thing that anyone conjecture or says about him change that. And I think he would want us talking about it because enlightenment, wisdom. And I believe that the victims in this sense would approve, because I feel like either way you go with it, right? Either informant, undercover, forced to snitch due to their own charges, whatever it may have been that involved Kaylee and Maddie either being unsuspected that night at the grub truck, whatever position that they took in that situation, this lets me know that many of the students in Idaho were obviously intimately aware of the struggle with illicit drugs and addiction. But they have that perfect victim vibe, and I believe a lot of people don't want to let that go. Oh, look at the fraternities. Aren't they all beautiful? You know, they look too nice. They're too fucking clean cut to be illicit drug dealers. Look at her, isn't she cute? Well, you would picture that, God forbid if something had happened to her, instead of her getting busted by the DEA, the world would say, she didn't have anything to do with drugs. You can't prove that, because certainly we wouldn't had the investigation not been announced due to violence and, murder. Lots of undercover investigations, years and years worth of taxpayer dollars get thrown into covert ops that are not announced all the time. The absolute only ones we hear about are the ones that are public relations wise braggable. And honey, this ain't it. So they might would say, we're crazy because she's so cute. But, fast forward a year and she still apparently was a part of illicit drug trades and got busted again in Operation Firecracker. This is prior to being busted as her part of the syndicate at the fraternities and during the universities undercover. Cover. You know what they say about books, judging them.